I've got the Immutable story coming up on the stage now, and I've got to say, if I was sadly more than 20 years younger, I mean, what they are doing is what I'd love to be doing. I mean, it's an extraordinary story to watch from a homegrown perspective. You know, they are a sponsor, so they're sitting there, but they're not a sponsor again because anyone badgered them. You know, they're contributing into the community. They're growing at an extraordinary pace. I think they're building a business. You know, 3.0. Business. You know, resourcing is an interesting thing. I watch, you know, they're hiring people at pace. So if you've got an inclination to work for a company that's a rocket ship, literally, do it. And, you know, there are so many elements of the story which are great to watch and sort of, I think, reflected in the conversation today that we had at the beginning with Bankless, where, you know, reaching into Australian businesses, you go, these stories are not, you know, Australian stories being injected into this conversation. They're Australian stories leading this conversation. So I'm going to welcome the panel to the stage in just a sec. I think they're getting mic'd up as we speak, but it's just something to watch and be proud of. I mean, what we said earlier about how quickly businesses are iterating in the ecosystem, there's money coming. The truth is, and this is something I've chatted about with a lot of people in the VC space, you know, save for John and a handful of others who were looking at this space over a long period of time, the reality is investment money was absent. You know, I saw a lot of business ideas and a lot of great business people who never got a chance to do anything because they were told very quickly, this isn't a thing. It was sad to watch. I always used to take personally when people said, you know, this money it was a scam. Here's the position I put. If you called every person who tried to build a business in this country a scammer, you'd be besmirching the reputation of a lot of people. And it used to absolutely shit me to tears that people would say, if we're talking blockchain and DLT and crypto, they're scammers. They're not. They're people who had dreams to build businesses and it didn't work out. You know, give them a pat on the back for having a crack, rather than saying, well, you know, someone gave them the money and they didn't make money. Go, well, a lot of people have been given money and not made money. So that's the pushback that I always give aggressively. So a lot of businesses now will see some sunshine. But they're built on the shoulders of everyone that has come before, which I think is an important thing to sort of recognise in the way people have built things. But great pleasure to have this panel here talking about the extraordinary things they're doing in Australia and around the world. So I welcome you all to the stage.
Thank you, Steve. I don't think you could have teed us up any better, to be honest. If you're 20 years younger than Steve and you want somewhere to work, then
speak to me.
That could be this whole panel.
I'm your woman.
That was very effective. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming today. My name's John Henderson. I'm a partner at Airtree Ventures. We're an Australian venture fund. I lead our crypto practice. We've just raised $700 million, of which 50 is dedicated to tokens, with more to go into companies like Immutable, who also raise in equity. And one of the companies we've backed, and that clearly makes this not financial advice, is Immutable. And I've got the full squad here, so I'm really pleased to be joined on my right by James, who's the founder and CEO. Next to him, Jill, who is the COO of Immutable and also a venture partner at Airtree. And on the far right is Alex, who's the CTO. So I thought we might use the brief time we have to quickly run through the story of Immutable and kind of where you've come to and where you are now. We might talk a little bit about scaling Ethereum and some of the technology decisions that this company has made. And then finally, maybe something that distinguishes Immutable from some of the projects you've heard from so far, which is the real company building and growth aspect of this. We are, how many people now?
200.
200 going on 400 by the end of the year. And so I think there's a big conversation to be had about what that looks like. But James, maybe let's kick off with you, founder, CEO in this since the bear market. Do you want to talk about how the company kicked off and then how you sort of traversed the journey towards a L2?
Awesome. So I co-founded the company with my brother and also with Alex. And my brother and I had been in the blockchain space for a while. We saw Bitcoin in 2013, and like I think many people who see Bitcoin for the first time, alarm bells went off, it's a scary thing to invest in, and I sort of dismissed it at first. It took me a long time to really understand more why it was so valuable. But in 2014 and 2015, when we saw Ethereum and then Ethereum launch, we were immediately obsessed with it. It was very clear how this was going to be a groundbreaking technology. So, of course, we spent the next 2 years or so building different things, trying to work out what we could build in the space. And then in 2017, we saw something called CryptoPunks. And if people have heard of CryptoPunks, maybe show of hands, if people have, brilliant. It wasn't that long ago when you do this when no one would put their hand up at all. And back when this launched, it was essentially, I don't even want to say a side hustle. It was like these people, almost a university project, which they were building at this time. And when we saw it, it was really, really apparent to us that this tech for non-fungible tokens, or NFTs, was groundbreaking in itself, and the immediate thing to do when you see any groundbreaking tech is add it into video games. Robbie and I had a very misspent youth playing so many video games, and Alex also did as well, potentially even worse than our misspent youth. And for us, the idea of digital items having value and being able to be traded wasn't even novel, because we'd spent our whole childhood and teenagerhood stealing dad's credit card and using it to go buy different items in games against their terms of service on the black markets on eBay. So for us, the ability that you could do this in a way that was above board and gave trust guarantees to end users was so clearly going to be a hit. And so we started building a game. It was called Etherbots.
And sorry to interrupt you. So it was the above board, because I mean, I, like most people, went and bought gold for World of Warcraft on some guy from Telegram who I never met, which was sketchy, and then it was of no value to me when I stopped playing the game. But it sounds like, because there's two aspects there. There's the transferability, and then there's is this legal within the game? It sounds like it was that that second component that...
I think they're both crucial. And maybe another interesting story is the game of choice that I used to play growing up was a game called RuneScape. And I'd have many thousands of hours into it, and my brother took my RuneScape account once, and he would have only been like 12 years old at the time, and he promptly went and lost all the items. And so he then went online on eBay, bought the items again with real money, and then RuneScape banned our account. And I was very angry with him, but at that point it shows like the guarantees that you have over these items, and so this was something which we'd put thousands of hours into, and hundreds of dollars into for these items. It was just take it immediately. And I think that from that experience, we've learned a couple of things. One, there's a massive inherent demand for these items. Like, games are starting to overtake the world as the main form of culture, the main form of interaction which people have. And number two, you can't really trust games companies at all. And I say that as, we're part of Immutable, and we have a whole game studio part of our business. And what's really interesting is with Ethereum, you don't have to trust us. You can transfer these items, you can actually own them, and that's what the transition that we're going into.
And just to put some numbers on that, because I think people underestimate the cultural impact of the gaming industry. So we at Airtree spend a little bit of time on this, and like, what's something that impacts culture massively? Music. The music industry today is about $20 billion, the recorded music industry. Gaming is about $160 billion. And I think that surprises people, that we're talking like almost an order of magnitude size increase on gaming, and therefore kind of cultural permeability. So you got pissed off about Robbie losing all your RuneScape stuff. Yeah. Talk us through how that led into Immutable.
So we decided that we wanted to build out a multiplayer blockchain game using NFTs. And we ended up building out this game called Etherbots, which was these robots which could battle. We learned a lot. In fact, not just the items were put on Ethereum in smart contracts. I think, and Alex can correct me if I'm wrong, but we probably built one of the most complex smart contracts with this battling perk tree that had ever been built on Ethereum, because it's crazy to try and do, but we thought it was necessary to build this entire multiplayer battling game on the blockchain, so every part of it was trustless.
What year are we in?
End of 2017.
Okay.
So we launched that right after CryptoKitties launched, and because it was the first ever multiplayer game on a blockchain, and because it was something real in a time when people were hyping stuff up a lot and then never launching anything, it went really well. And based on that, we were able to go raise $2 million or so from Coinbase and some others, and put together our thesis, which is these NFTs and digital items, it's going to be a big thing. It needs two things. One, compelling content, where you'll want the content in the long run. And because of that, we made a game called Unchained, which is very similar to Pokemon cards or Magic the Gathering, if people know that. And then secondly, from the beginning, we set out to build a platform as well, which would make trading easy, and learning from the problems that we encountered with Unchained ended up solving a lot of the problems that we had as a game studio building on the blockchain.
All of this is on ETH-L1 so far?
So up until we ran into massive scaling issues with Unchained. So Unchained is one of the most successful games on any blockchain. It has, and what's different, people might have seen in the news, art selling for millions of dollars as NFTs or even tens of millions of dollars. That's not our design, and we're actually not very interested in that. For us in Gods Unchained, the average item sells for somewhere between 50 cents and $5. And the mission of Gods Unchained is to go mainstream and be mainstream appealing. And because of that, there's a lot of Gods Unchained NFTs. There's actually more Gods Unchained NFTs for a very long time than every other game built on Ethereum put together. And all the way through 2018 and 2019, we were running into problems with scalability, with liquidity, with having all these items be different because there's tens of millions of Gods Unchained NFTs.
Throw some, I think Robbie said on the Bankless podcast this morning, it's the third biggest play-to-earn game?
Yeah, so Gods Unchained, it's got a lot of crazy numbers behind it in terms of the value which has been given to players who have earned it. That's who, we've given to players about $300 million who played Gods Unchained.
Okay, so then how obvious, I think we can all see where this story is going. You came up against scalability challenges, so then what?
So we spent a lot of time looking at how can we scale Ethereum. We looked at, do we build a separate blockchain to Ethereum? But we think that Ethereum has so many advantages that we didn't want to let go of. It's battle tested. It's got the best trust and security out of any virtual machine enabled blockchain. It has massive amounts of liquidity, massive amounts of supporters, and we've been part of the community for a really long time. So we didn't want to build out a separate blockchain. We looked at side chains, we looked at plasma chains, we looked at stake channels and wasted quite a bit of money going down the stake channel path and a lot of Alex's time as well. And then we saw zero knowledge rollups. And for us, at first, we're like, this seems almost too good to be true. Is it going to be ready on time? Is it commercially viable? And as we looked into it, it's the idea that you can roll up, essentially for non-technical people. Imagine in the same way you might zip a file and compress that file. It's zipping transactions together. And you just upload that zipped transaction of all the different transactions together on the blockchain.
So I want to go to Alex on the technical decisions made, but just before we get there, so vision for Immutable today, marketplace for gaming. Do you want to just sort of step us beyond that? Because I think gaming is kind of step one, right?
So for us, we're building out the technology which brings scale and liquidity for NFTs. And what's interesting is that NFTs actually, non-fungible items, actually comprise the most amount of value on Earth. It's actually more than fungible items. So currently, we try and adapt a lot of different markets to fungible markets, whether it's oil futures or shares. There's actually normally lots of different types of them, and we try to compress them down to fungible markets to be tradable. And markets which are non-fungible, real estate, have massive problems with liquidity, typically. So for us, we're going into gaming because we believe that it's going to be a massive, culturally important area, but also if we can crack how you can have liquidity and scale for trading non-fungible digital items, like game items, then there are so many other markets which just start opening themselves up to be tradable as well.
I want to come back to that, but this seems like a good point to jump off into technical decisions. So Alex, you've got this game, it's working, and the fact that it's working is causing you all kinds of problems because Ethereum is working less well than the game.
Yep.
Talk to us about kind of that journey towards building an L2, the choice for ZK rollups, the choice for Starkware. Take us on that sort of...
Definitely. I think probably where this journey starts is, as you say, with the success of Gods Unchained. We were minting a lot of NFTs, and I think James, I'll say the same stat as we said earlier, there are still, we migrated from L1 to L2, but there are still more Gods Unchained cards on L1 than every other NFT ever issued, put together on Ethereum. And that was a hard thing to make happen because essentially, even at that time, minting that many NFTs was prohibitively expensive. I think there was something like 10 million, roughly, was the order we were talking about there. And so for the first sort of, almost I'd say 9 months of this problem, we were looking at how can we optimize things on Ethereum L1. And what that looked like for the technical people in the room was, how can we rewrite the ERC 721 implementations to be more gas efficient for large-scale minting transactions, right? And sort of optimizing the specific domain that we were looking for. And we found some really great results. And there are still blog articles you can read on the internet about some of the progress that we made there, I think, and some of that is still used today by a lot of NFT projects to make minting on L1 somewhat viable. But it still wasn't enough. It was still going to cost us really substantial amounts of money. And we knew that it wasn't just about, hey, could we turn this into a profitable business? By this stage, we were also thinking, how is this ever going to work for many businesses? How is a traditional game studio going to come here and we say, okay, well, you can sell your assets, but first you're going to sort of have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars minting them, and they might sell or they might not sell, and we'll work that bit out later. That was a pretty tough narrative to sell. And so what we knew was that we needed to create a solution that would properly solve this, right? So that would take away some of the fluctuations of gas and would also just allow for a much higher scale of minting. And I think James has the timeline exactly right. We tried all the other options, right? We talked to everyone notable in the space. And what we found was, and we started working with the Starkware team, right, who I really strongly recommend to everyone, back before there was really a live product in this space. It was zero knowledge rollups at that point were a bit of a science project. Right? There was something that was on the Ethereum scaling roadmap and something that was talked about as, hey, this will be a really great technology once it works, or like once it's production grade, and that's still a few years away. That timeline happened massively ahead of, I think, probably even what we were expecting at first. Things are able to become production grade much faster. Even the work that's been done up until today around ZK EVM and similar technologies has come much faster than people were initially expecting around that sort of point of 2019. And what we really liked about the technology was that it gave us A, massive scale, and B, gave us really clear differentiation because, as I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later, now almost every blockchain has, there's scalability, there's TPS numbers, there's block times, and there's lots of sort of table-based comparisons that you can put together. There are very few solutions that would actually give you the decentralization and liquidity of Ethereum. And when we saw that and we said, okay, we can keep the best bits. The reasons that people want to use this technology is so that you actually have the decentralization of the assets and you actually do get some really great ownership properties. And the only way that we can enable that is taking a bet on what at the time was a bit of a future technology. And so our journey has just been, how can we actually take that technology, which was a bit of an academic construct at that time, and turn that into not just a production-grade technology, but a production-grade technology for game studios, for social media companies that want to do planet scale. That's been our journey. And that's been one that I think partly the choice of Starkware along that journey was looking for a partner that could support us in not just sort of, hey, here's a research project, but hey, here is a platform that we can take to other businesses that can be genuinely relied on, because that's actually what you're offering. It's not a good thing when blockchains go down or when there are like substantial scaling issues or when gas prices surge. Obviously, that's good in some ways because it's the network sort of reacting to defend itself and to establish a fee market. But it's really bad in other ways because it makes it so much more challenging to build a real proper business with longevity on top of that. And so we wanted to be a platform where people could build that. And I think to some extent, that just meant that the technology choices that we made were some of the only choices available to us if we actually wanted to achieve that goal.
Am I right to say you were the second project to go live on Starkware behind DYDX?
No, we were the second project behind a company called Diversify, which essentially made an ERC20 exchange. I think you can still use it. But we were the first project to use the technology for NFTs, and we were using it and still are using it at a substantially larger scale. And in fact, when we started building, even Diversify wasn't live, right? So there was no sort of live projects apart from, I think, some of the very primitive, maybe like a ZK swap that was live at the time. And even that was not that much of an improvement on L1 and hadn't seen much traction.
So let's take this opportunity to compare and contrast, and you'll probably be polite and not throw shade on your competitors, but I won't. So you could have gone on Polychain, on Matic, you could have gone on Solana, you could have gone on whatever Binance's thing's called. You could have done the Axie thing and built your own side chain.
Yep.
Talk us through the sort of respective trade-offs against the competitors, because frankly, and we'll talk about this with Jill, you're now in like a knife fight with all these groups about who can get customers and who can get attention.
Yeah, I think what we looked at as we made that decision was we didn't sort of start with the conclusion and work backwards to the answer. Like we didn't say, okay, we must have a zero knowledge rollup for Ethereum. We wanted to solve the problem that we were experiencing and the problems that we thought that our customers, as we were building a platform product, would experience. And I think one of the key things, as James pointed out, when you actually set out to build a successful blockchain game, you're not just looking at, okay, what gives me the highest scale, right? What gives me the best user experience? Ultimately, the way that projects in the space judge their success is usually one of two numbers. How much did we do on primary sales, and how healthy is the secondary market economy? And that sort of liquidity on the secondary market is one of the key things that we were sort of optimizing for when we made our choices. And I think still are the key things that projects should optimize for when they choose platforms and make these types of decisions. And those other networks, right? You can sort of put TPS numbers in sort of big shining lights and things like that.
When they're up.
When they're up, right? What we thought was a challenge on those fronts was that these were very new platforms, right? Platforms that hadn't been tested and weren't being built specifically with the needs of these customers in mind, right? So, is it okay if your network has a massive gas surge because everyone is buying sunflowers, right? Is it okay if the network goes down because there is still a fairly limited decentralization of the validator set? Those types of trade-offs might be acceptable for particular projects. We didn't think they were ever going to be acceptable for the types of projects that we really wanted to support, which were those planet scale games. And so for us, I guess when it comes to choosing to use one of those competitors or building our own solution, we were really amenable to working with someone else or putting together a combined solution. But ultimately, we just felt that we didn't have what we actually wanted, which was the needs of our customers genuinely look different. It's not about who can sort of release an EVM clone chain and you sort of turn down security and decentralization and you turn up transaction throughput and hooray, Ethereum's problems are solved and now you can build a successful game. It's just not even close to enough. You have to do so much more work on everything from liquidity, right? Connecting marketplaces and games together, improving the user experience and the wallet experience, improving the actual accessibility of it to developers who aren't starting from a blockchain context. There's so much work to do there. One of the other nice things is building on Ethereum means that we actually don't have to reconstruct an entire blockchain ecosystem from scratch. I think what we saw, this isn't the first time it's been sort of high scale chains taking on Ethereum, for those of you who've been in the space a little longer. And this without being a direct knock on any of those competitors. I think there is so much work to do to re-establish that ecosystem from scratch. And doing that in a context where you don't have as many people who want to sort of be open source contributors to that and build on it for the sake of building on it because they believe in the future of it, and where you just have to pay people a lot of money to come and build up the rest of your platform, it's really hard to start an artificial ecosystem from scratch. And so we think that by targeting specifically the problem and really narrowing down on how can we provide the best possible experience, that was a winning strategy for us at the time, and I think it's going to be a winning strategy for us going forward.
So I want to talk to Jill about company building, but before I do, let me ask maybe the harder and other end of that question. So I think it was clear to us, and I think it's clear to a lot of people, that ZK, that zero knowledge proofs are going to be better than building on an L1 or a multi-purpose L2. But you're built on Starkware, Starknet's coming. What's to stop people building directly on that?
Look, I think there's nothing to stop people building directly on that. Our hypothesis, as it has always been, is we have to offer value substantially above what anyone else is offering in the ecosystem. And as I said before, the key thing that we are offering our customers, right, has been, I think, for the first little while, was about scale. It was hey, you can take a project and it will be more scalable on Immutable X, and that was the primary form of differentiation. Scalability is no longer really differentiating. Scalability is table stakes. That's what you need in order to have any chance at possibly winning one of these deals. It's the same as things like fiat on-ramps or a decent wallet experience. The key differentiator is that liquidity that you can create for projects. One product that we talk about quite a bit at Immutable, and something that we wrote a blog article on recently, is what we sort of called the open or global order book. Immutable connects all of these marketplaces, so all the NFT marketplaces that you sort of know and love, whether those are the new marketplaces that are being released by centralized exchanges, some of the existing biggest NFT marketplaces in the world, or really small marketplaces. We love the thesis that eventually it won't make sense to trade, for instance, God's Unchained cards on OpenSea, which is an experience which is fully sort of aggregated, doesn't have any sort of respect for the type of NFT that you're actually trading. That's a great experience for some types of traders, but some types of traders, they want to trade God's Unchained cards on a community-built deck-building website, and that's the best marketplace experience for them. And we want to sort of create this big liquidity network where all of those games and all of those marketplaces are communicating with the same assets and the same order book, right, as all of the games which actually put content into that network. And that's something that I think substantially, even you can go and build on Starknet today and you won't have that. I think without giving anything away, I think we're also going to be looking to help games that are building on StarkNet solve some of their problems. But what I do want to say is that there is just so much more to choosing the right platform than sort of pure under-the-hood scalability. We are really excited whenever there's a new technology that didn't exist a couple of years ago, like ZK-AVM is just a great example of them. That unlocks so much potential for some of our customers. And what we have to do is consistently make sure that we're adding value vastly over and above that. And as it turns out, the problems that games have is not that the number that it says on the tin for scalability isn't high enough. The problem that these really high quality NFT projects have is much deeper, and that's the problem that we want to solve.
So Jill is different to these two.
Female.
There's that. But Jill's also the kind of the internet executive, the company builder. So when we met Jill, she'd taken safety culture from a few people in a shed to, I think, 400 maybe, and a couple of billion of enterprise value. She'd then been the CEO of Vamp and turned that around. She'd worked with the Airtree portfolio and turned them around. So there was sort of Jill was the executive out on the hunt for her next thing, and came across these two fast talkers talking about scalability and NFTs and a whole bunch of stuff. Tell us about joining a company like this, Jill, and then you've seen companies go from product market fit to the growth journey. Tell us about sort of how you're thinking about that journey for Immutable and what sort of the key things over the next 12 months are.
I suppose I'm the proof point that you don't have to be crypto native to come in and be successful in a Web3 company. So that's what I would encourage everyone to do, and that's what we encourage everyone to do. We're demystifying Web3 when people can join Immutable. So when people come in to our business, we onboard them and we demystify that and make them comfortable in this business, because sitting in between these two, it could be quite intimidating if you let it. But what we're looking to do is to bring people in who've done other interesting things, who've scaled businesses, who've had other experiences, layering that on top of a crypto native founding team. That's where you really see the magic happening. So John obviously knows, he's written a nice big check. We got $200 million check, $2.5 billion valuation. With that, you can do a lot of things. And what we decided as an executive team is...
You're in US dollars, by the way. That's
US
almost
dollar.
Infinite money here.
It's a wee bit more. But what we decided to do with those valuations and the availability of that cash was to pay the people who created that value what they deserved. And so we as a team have decided to go into market, hire the top talent that we can, and really scale this business, and that's what we're doing. We want to create a really high-performing environment for them. So you're sitting next to other top talent, and they're there to support you. We want to create great learning and development opportunities for people. We want them to be working on the best tech, and we'll pay them what they're worth as well. So in market, it might be seen as a knife fight, but being from Glasgow, it helps in that. And I think I can win that knife fight. So that's what we're doing. We're looking to hire the top talent and give them an environment where they can really flourish. And the autonomy, give them the freedom to kind of put their experience and skills to work to help us achieve what we're looking to achieve.
And so that means... Give us numbers again. How big now? At what rate are you going to recruit people?
So I think when I first started talking to the team, we were less than 100, and that was maybe about 4 or 5 months ago. We'll be 200 at the end of March. I do a lot of interviews. We hope to be close to about 350 by the end of the year as well. And we'll have a much more global footprint. So we are predominantly based in Sydney today. We do have talent in Asia, and we do have talent in the US, and a small amount in EMEA. But we'll be looking to globalize completely. We're going to have a hub in Asia. We're going to have a hub in the west coast of the US as well, and a hub in EMEA.
And speaking of knife fights, and I'm mindful Steve's going to start hovering awkwardly soon, but there's talent, right, which is one thing that is critical, and you're building a scaled organisation. This isn't like a DeFi project that's going to have 15 people and do its thing. The there's also partners and customers.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk through sort of the approach to that?
It's similarly competitive out there with the competition to get customers and partners into our ecosystem. But again, it is the team that will be the differentiator there. We've obviously got the tech that Alex has spoken about. That will definitely be a winning formula for us. Our team has to be a winning formula. We want to partner with our customers and the partners, bring them along this journey, be there at every step that they need to make them successful. And we always have a nice bank of tokens that is available for them for incentives. So we're issuing incentives that are really aligned to what we are trying to achieve and what they're trying to achieve and what our token holders are trying to achieve as well.
And how do you think about, I mean, you've talked about GameStop publicly. I imagine there's another pipeline of, do you want to distinguish between sort of partners like that and individual gaming companies and how you think about the two go-to-markets?
Well, we've got a platform that we want to be available to everyone. We want to be agnostic on the marketplaces that we onboard onto our company. So you've got big marketplaces like GameStop. We've got our own marketplace as well. But we were looking, as Alex said earlier, smaller marketplaces as well to integrate onto the platform. So we've got, AAA gaming companies who can work with Immutable, but we've also got indie and small, single developer game developers who also can be successful on the platform as well.
And I mean, maybe that's a good place to wrap, because I think that's one of the most exciting things about this company is they've got the best technology platform in market, but they're also bringing normies into crypto. Like all of these AAA developers, all of these kind of marketplaces are figuring out, how do we bring our digital items on chain, or how do we bring our games into a play-to-earn world? And my hope, and I hope what you've heard today, is that Immutable is the team to do that. And when I say the team to do that, I mean the beginnings of a team to do that. And I think if we're to leave you with one message, it's that you should come join us.
Yep.
Thanks very much.
Hit me up.